If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. Chris Cuomo is in the news again, and it's not good. This time, the scuttlebutt is that he didn't merely cover up for or try to give advice on how to sidestep a sexual misconduct claim. This time, the allegation is that Chris Cuomo was the one committing the misconduct. And just like that, 500 black media bootlicks began drooling at the mouth in the pathetic anticipation that maybe, just maybe, they'll get his job. Oh yeah, you can bet that every clown from Van Jones to Roly-Poly has been sending their resumes around. Just a reminder, in case Chris Cuomo's out of here, I'm available, I am available. By the way, just on a side note, remember that little proposed show that CNN had announced a couple of years back that was going to have Bakari Sellers and April Ryan and a couple of other black nobodies on there? I guess this was going to be their attempt to see if CNN could make their own counterfeit black media show. Remember when CNN put that show on the air and how well that show went? Me neither. A large part of mind control is to get the people that you're trying to control to accept your lies and propaganda. And of course, that always goes a hell of a lot easier if the individual or individuals who are telling the lies have a lot in common with the people who the lies are being told to. As TBA beautifully put it, when you're trying to sell somebody up the river, the easiest way is to get one of their own to do it. Tonight's video essay is going to carry on the political and racial significance of the Haitian migrant crisis, which has now become a mass deportation. For those of you who didn't know, the Del Rio Bridge is officially open again. It has been cleared of all Haitian migrants. In fact, they've cleared it of everyone. Now look at what they were able to do. 10,000 plus people, because it was more than 10,000 plus people moved out. Lickety-split, didn't take but a few days to do it. Now, if they were moving over 10,000 plus people in the run of 30 days, they'd have over 300,000 people gone. Yeah, it seems the Border Patrol and ICE, they have their ability to do mass deportations just as long as it's black folks who they're going after. And what needs to be remembered is the Haitian community, both here in the U.S. and in Haiti, they happen to be up in arms about this, but you know who's not up in arms about it? Your typical white liberal groups. And you know who else ain't up in arms about it? Those of us black folks who came out of slavery in this country. The FBA/DAS community of this country. You know, the people who are typically called African Americans, who all these black migrants don't want to be associated with. Well, seems the white supremacists are making it clear you won't be associated with them because you're going to be gone. Now all of a sudden they're like, no, we wish to stay. No, y'all don't want to stay. You don't want to be around us. And you know what? I'm fine with that. They slammed the door shut on these guys. You know what? I'm fine with that too. Some of you who apparently thought that black empowerment and stomping out global white supremacy means that we make excuses for black folks around the globe who work against our interest, you've had the game all wrong, pretending as if somehow black empowerment meant that we accept the slings and arrows and persistent attacks of people from within our own group, and that's not what it means. You better figure out what we were talking about when we said we have to take a hard-nosed approach to our power, and power begins within. It begins with disciplining your own ranks. Yes, we must have black solidarity worldwide, but we can't pretend any longer that the rest of the black world wants it like we do. In fact, most of them don't want it. We have to accept the hard reality that we're pretty much the only ones waving the flag of black empowerment. Everyone else around the globe is, at worst, they're trying to be a bunch of wannabe Europeans, or at best, and this really ain't best at all, you have some folks who, as far as they're concerned, they're going to be a bunch of exclusivist, tribalist groups. They apparently think that they're going to be an island unto themselves. No pun intended in the case of Haiti. But you got some of these groups, and especially you see, like, say, in the Horn of Africa or something, these people who apparently think that they're going to just basically be a world unto themselves. And what's happening is they're basically prey for whoever wants to run up on them. I have neither the time nor the inclination to try to teach somebody how to act in their own self-interest for their own self-preservation. And those of us here in the U.S. whose bloodline goes back to the killing fields of the American South, we cannot and will not continue being suicidally idealistic in our desire for some black unity that, truth be told, exists for us in our minds, but it doesn't exist in the hearts and minds of the rest of them. I don't want unity with people who disrespect me. It is impossible to have unity with people who want to be separate from us. And it's stupid to want unity with people who are hostile and antagonistic towards you. If they look down on you, that means unity is impossible. We've pointed out the disrespect from these black migrants from the very beginning. We've been talking about it for 15 years now. And we also warned that the day was coming when all of that disrespect would no longer be tolerated. And that day is here now. So, what's happening? What is it that the black media is trying to do by making these declarations? Well, first of all, we are not trying to separate ourselves from the Caribbean and Africans. They were the ones who separated themselves from us. Not merely when they get over here, but whenever we have made the trek to go to them, they make it very clear, you're not welcome here. We ain't backing you. Sure, you'll have a few twos and fews who are with the program, but the thing about it is you cannot have an alliance with twos and fews. You have to have an alliance with the majority of a group. And what do the majority of them say? What are the majority of them about? They let their own envy and, truth be told, their own feelings of inferiority in relation to us take over. But not to mention, they're still on that same old tribalism nonsense, the same stuff that made Africa ready prey for the Europeans and the Arabs and Asians ever since. They still haven't learned, and they're not going to, and we have to own up to that reality. It's not a matter of they haven't gotten the message. They've gotten the message. They've just decided they're going to ignore it. They've gotten the wake-up call. And then they put the phone back on the hook and they hit the snooze button and go right back to catching Z's. We'll let them stay asleep then. We are not trying to disparage the diaspora, but we are going to clarify our place in the diaspora. That's what's happening here. We're making it clear where everyone stands. Respect begins at home. If the people who we share the most in common with refuse to respect us, especially after we've done so much for them, without reward and without asking for anything for it, after we have been the standard bearers for what it means to be black, and for all our faults we have represented blackness excellently. If they refuse to show respect, we must show the world that we will not be disrespected, not by anyone. That's part of what it means to be black, too. Black does not mean you just accept people disrespecting you and discounting you and disparaging you and running you into the ground. No. If you truly understand that you are the father and mother of civilization, then you don't allow anybody to decide they're going to step and spit on that. You make it very clear disrespect carries consequences. And let's be honest, when it comes to these other groups, particularly these black migrants, they are jealous of us. They're jealous of what we, an oppressed minority, in the very belly of the beast, managed to do in the very core of white supremacy. The changes we managed to make that they failed to make in their own lands when they're the majority. The Haitians ran the doggone French out, allegedly, and yet you don't see any of the changes that we were able to make in Haiti. Not only were they not able to get the French to make any changes, they can't even get their own to make any changes. They're jealous and angry about what they failed to do in their own lands. And they feel envious, and truth be told, they carry an inferiority complex when they're around us. They have entire countries and their failed states. Then they have the nerve to attack us and run us down, but only after they get over here, after we made it possible for them to be here. Well, enough is enough. If you're so hardworking as you claim, if you're so smart as you claim, if your culture is so superior as you claim, then you can prove it by example. Go stand your country up on its own 2 feet. It'll be the first time that it's ever happened on your watch. You want to brag about how your forefathers in Haiti kicked out 3 superpowers? Never mind the fact that in the 19th century, neither France, Britain, nor the US were superpowers. But if you want to brag about kicking out 3 so-called superpowers, then why don't you prove that you can kick out 3 corrupt families out of Haiti? The problem in Haiti is you have 3 families who control everything. Well, hell, if you kicked out 3 superpowers, you should have been able to kick out those 3 corrupt families before breakfast. Seems to me that you should have made short work of them. But that's the problem, ain't it? You see, first of all, you got a bunch of folk who ran from their responsibilities, who ran from their inheritance, by the way. They ran away from what their forefathers fought and bled and died to secure for them, and now they're over here talking tough about things they didn't do. Forcing the French oppressors out of Haiti, that was Jean-Jacques Dessalines' accomplishment, not yours. That was your forefathers' accomplishment, but let's be honest. The majority of Haitians did not take part in the Haitian Revolution. Let's not push this fiction that all of Haiti rose up. They did not. Ain't no majority that rose up. It was only a select brave few who stood. The rest of them just stood back. And we still see it today. You take a look at Haiti, they're waiting to see if somebody else is going to fight and die for their freedom, same way that 200 plus years ago, their ancestors waited to see if some of the brave, principled Haitians were going to fight and die for their freedom. At some point, you got to be willing to put your neck on the chopping block, to put your life on the line and make it clear, I am going to have my power and be ruler of my land and ruler of my destiny, or I'd rather die. You have to make that choice. A shame that these black migrants don't spend more time listening to our grandmaster teachers. They would have learned something. Dr. John Henrik Clarke said it best. No generation's freedom is secure until that generation makes it secure. Nobody is going to be able to fight for your freedom. The Haitian Revolution, that was that generation fighting for their freedom. They didn't have the ability to fight for their children's, nor should they. And all the vainglorious boasting about battles of yesteryear that other people, far better generations, fought for and won, those victories that you brag about that you didn't win, you're not fooling anybody. Your forefathers gave Haiti to you as your inheritance, and it was an inheritance paid for in their own blood. There's no way you can put a price tag on that. They took the slave fields, where they were beaten, raped, and murdered, and they made you the masters of those fields. You went from being the slaves in the fields to being the masters of the fields, in fact, of the entire island damn near. And now, 200 years later, you abandon the very soil that had been drenched in your forefathers' blood. And you abandoned it without the enemy having to fire a single shot. See, if the Haitian revolutionaries had fled the island, it would have made sense. God knows the French were taking out some of the most violent, in fact, the most violent measures that they could to try to put down the Haitian Revolution. Savagery that it's hard to find the French doing anything like that at any point in Europe. The stuff that they were doing in Haiti in their attempts to terrorize the Haitian revolutionaries, the Haitian freedom fighters. See, if those guys had run 200 years ago, it would have made sense with the unspeakable brutality that they were up against. But instead, you had those guys who said, you know what, we're going to show them that we can out-brutalize the oppressors, which is what they did. They made it very clear. We're going to get 10 of yours for every one of ours. You commit an atrocity, we'll come up with something worse. The French got the message. They didn't run 200 years ago, they stood. I guess that's the reason why they wound up owning the island, and you wound up fleeing the island. You have voluntarily gone back to being slaves on the very soil that your forefathers died to make free. You have handed back to the oppressors the very ground your forefathers gave their lives to liberate from those same oppressors. And then the people who ran, they have the nerve to come over here and talk tough and tell us about the fights that they won, fights that took place hundreds of years ago that you didn't take place in, when everyone can see that you run from every fight. You know, there's that stereotype about France that they surrender all the time and that it's rooted in French history, but clearly the Haitians are so desirous to be imitation Frenchmen, they're copying the French's example. They surrender to everyone. They flee from everyone. And then they have the gall to turn around and brag about how great their home country is and how their culture is so much better than black people in the United States. That's an inferiority complex talking. You're trying to compensate for your own feelings of unworthiness. Look at the opportunities that you enjoy here. Look at the legal structure and social institutions that made it possible. Now, how many of those things were put there by black migrants, Haitian or otherwise? How many of those laws or social movements were the result of anything that these black migrants did? You benefit from work done by other people long before your folks even knew that a place called the United States even existed. Everyone sees your boasting and bragging about yourselves for the empty vanity that it is. We look at what you've done. We've tried to compare ourselves to you. Just to go ahead and do a side-by-side comparison, what have you guys managed to do in your homelands? Be it in Haiti or the U.S., what was it the black migrants were able to do to contribute to the track record in the U.S.? And the answer, nothing. They didn't come here to put in any work. They just came here to see what they could take advantage of. And this in a place where you're the majority. You're the majority in Haiti. You're the majority in Africa and the Caribbean islands. And allegedly in control of those places. And yet I look to see if there's anything even resembling what we've been able to carve out here. And the answer is there's not. Oh, but the white media says you're doing better than us. That's because they know that the quickest way to get a bootlick to go ahead and be master's pet is to pat him on the head. And you see that your white benefactors who encouraged you to attack us, who encouraged you to be a disruptive element from within, they're not even making a pretense that they want you here. Where's your white liberal establishment to be up in arms about the whipping of Haitian migrants? Better yet, where are the Haitians in the United States to do anything about it? Come on, there's some Haitians in Texas, but you wouldn't know it by looking at what's going on the border. Where's the ADL at? Where's the Human Rights Watches at? All of these white super liberals, where they at? Where's the members of the House of Representatives to do their sit-ins? Hey, how about a prayer vigil on the steps of the Capitol building? That's always good for a laugh. Hey, where's AOC at, or her black equivalent, to go to the border and pretend to cry? Oh yeah, the members of the Congressional Black Talkers, they didn't even bother to leave D.C. They already knew that even if they called themselves defying the white leadership of the DNC to go to the border, well, the Haitians would have been gone long before they got there. They knew it. You better not do anything that embarrasses your white masters and the Congressional Black Talkers, or rather the Congressional Immigrant Talkers, because a disproportionate number of them are immigrants. They knuckled under because every man for himself, that's the rule in the places where they come from. You take a look at Haiti, that's every man for himself. You start talking about black empowerment, they're like, what the hell is that? What you talking about? No wonder you have anonymous Haitians on the internet asking us to speak up for them. They see that nobody in the media or the government will. And this with a Haitian in the White House. Where in the world is Karine Stud-Pierre? Oh, you had articles about her, talking about the first Haitian who's in the White House as press secretary, all that nonsense, though most of the articles were about her sexual preference, her LGBT status. But that only went on for a hot minute because Jen Psaki, they want to make sure that a white woman's going to be the face of Joe Biden's little propaganda squad. They're not trying to prop up any of these bootlicks. But ever since the Haitian border crisis started, Karine Stud-Pierre's been talking about everything but on the few occasions that she says anything. You better put out an APB about her. Ain't nobody seen her. At this point, she hasn't posted anything since September 20th. That's almost a week ago. What, she ain't heard about what's happening on the border? Ain't got nothing to say? You would think that she would resign in protest. The Biden administration sees Border Patrol whipping the Haitians like a bunch of slaves. I posted for you the video of them screaming at the Haitians, saying your countries are the S word. And this with Trump out of office. And Karine Pierre, she ain't got nothing to say about it. You had a white man, the former special envoy to Haiti. You had a white man. He resigned. He said the treatment of the Haitians, I can't go along with this. I don't want my name associated with this. I'm going to resign in protest. Karine Pierre, well, far as she's concerned, that's the Haitians' problem. Hey, I'm getting mine. That's what's going on with her. And now you understand why these places are in the fix that they're in. Black unity? Where are the Haitians at to call her out for this? You got a Haitian who is literally the vice president or the president's little spokesperson, well, one of their little under spokespeople. She has access to the president anytime she wants. At the very least, she can write a memo to him anytime she wants. And yet she ain't said a word. Oh, what would it mean if she were to resign? Well, what it would mean for her is that her LGBT status would get revoked. Oh, yeah, see, the white media ain't got a problem with her talking about being Haitian, just as long as she makes sure to mention she's LGBT, because it's got to be all about intersectionalism. And by the way, don't make a big deal about being black, mind you. We really don't like that. Oh, yeah, she's playing the game. But you don't see any of these Haitian mouthpieces who are saying anything. Roly-Poly Martin damn sure didn't say anything. He should be the main one up in arms. But instead, as we saw, and TBA did a brilliant broadcast about this last night talking about that, here we are with Roly-Poly Martin, who's refusing to denounce or do anything to speak against Joe Biden. And that's because he's desperately hoping for an interview so his little struggle YouTube channel can get some traction. Oh, he's so desperate for somebody to come and talk to him. He thinks to himself that he's finally, that little broom closet of his sideshow is finally going to take off if he can just get somebody significant to come and talk to. They need to come and talk to me. We're trying to get them to come and talk to me. He won't say anything against Joe Biden even now. And that's because, like Karine Pierre, Roly-Poly Martin is desperately hoping for a job, and he doesn't want to be on anyone's bad side, because if he calls himself going after Joe Biden, well, the people at CNN and MSNBC might tell him, well, you know, Roly, we were thinking about giving you a show. He's dumb enough to believe it, too. But those little weekend things that we would have you on as a guest panelist, we're going to have to yank that because the people at the White House, they don't like you. In fact, nobody likes you. Roly-Poly already knows that what little usefulness he might hope to have to the white media hangs by a thread. He knows that. So he's not about to do anything like that. He ain't about to say, what are we going to be doing about Joe Biden? Should we punish him at the poll? Ain't going to be none of that. Ain't going to be no calling out Karine Pierre and telling her, you're right next to the president. Same thing for Joy Reid. Oh, she had lots to say about fellow immigrant Nicki Minaj. But here you got Haitians on the border being whipped. You got the U.S. bringing in unparalleled resources to airlift the Haitians out of there. For God's sake, you'd have thought it was Afghanistan or something. And yet you don't see Joy Reid deciding that she's going to call out Karine Pierre. Sister, you working at the White House? Sister, that's a blessing. Sister, I'm a fan of yours, sister. Oh, I look up to you, sister. You right next to the president, and you ain't saying nothing, sister. Oh, this is so disappointing. This is wrong. You see what's happening to black folks. They being hurt down there, being herded like cattle. They letting all these other folks in. They keeping the black folks out. Sister. You got a platform. It's a sister. All of a sudden, her sister girl routine gets put on hold. A Haitian who actually has access to the president during a time when Haitians are not liking the way they're being treated. And Joy Reid doesn't call out Karine Pierre either. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you the memo's already gone out. That tells you that the orders have already gone out. Don't you put no pressure on Joe Biden now. So you see what's happening here. Making sure that black people in particular, we're not letting more black folks in here, certainly not in any large numbers. That's a bipartisan issue. That has bipartisan support. Oh, the border can be slammed shut if black folks show up. And that has bipartisan support. You don't see anybody, the Democrats, saying, wait a minute here, we got to call out Joe Biden on this. We're going to write a mass letter to him objecting to this. Oh, they should have been up in arms, but they're not. Because the need to make sure that they control and subvert the 45 to 50 million plus ex-slaves in this country who came out of the killing fields of the American South, that project is underway and both parties are dedicated to that project succeeding. But that's the reason why the black media is going to keep talking about this one. Not because we're hoping that, oh, y'all need to bring the Haitians back. No, keep them. Put them over there. In fact, we can go ahead and give you a few more to put on the list. But the reason why we're bringing it up is to make it very well understood. Black empowerment means we're all on the same page. TBA gave a brilliant definition of what it means to be on code. I added a little bit to it at the end, but the definition that he gave was, we all understand what is in our interest, and we act accordingly. That's what a code of conduct means. We know what's in our interest, and that's what governs our behavior. People who think that it's cute to work against the interest of the group, who are calling themselves attacking the family, and they're going to try to call themselves being an island unto themselves, very well, they can do that. And white supremacy and the other forces of anti-black hostility, it ain't just white supremacy. We have no friends. White supremacy is just the biggest and baddest of the enemies, but hardly the only enemy. But speaking of enemies, you take a look at another white media bootlick, Mark Lamont Schill. On September 21st on his Twitter feed, he had 3 topics on his little sideshow: the Haitian crisis, fertility among black women, and the COVID vaccine. So only a third of his little sideshow was going to be about the Haitians, and the other 2/3 were going to be about abortion and the vaccine. And by the way, you find that across the board with all these little white media bootlicks. We got to talk about the vaccine. The vaccine's the most important thing. It's a lot more important than these damn Haitians. See, he's politicking hard to get someone in the white media to notice him. That's all that these guys are doing. That's all that these clowns ever do. They're trying to get a job in the government or in the white media. Just somebody who, if they can get some white power broker to put them on the payroll. And the next day, the tweets were even worse. He posted not 1 but 2 tweets about Tarana Burke, who apparently he was going to Skype call with. And did anyone care? You can look at the view count to see that people didn't even care enough to not care. And the poor souls who did watch, at least 50% of them wish that they hadn't. You see, the few videos that Mark Lamont Schill does on his little struggle channel that gets any views, the only ones that can get some views are when he talks to people who are part of the new voices of black media, or people who are representatives of or spend time talking to the black grassroots, the Judge Joe Browns, the Riza Islams. Lamont Schill thinks that if he can get some of these guys to come on his YouTube channel, why, that's going to make his channel take off. Why, that's going to be the boost that finally gets him out of the double digits, because that's where he's at right now. 40 views here, 30 views here. I would love to say that eventually we're going to be talking about some real numbers, but you're not. But that's what he thinks it'll take. He brings them on and then he attacks them. He thinks that if he can bring them on, that's going to trick us into thinking that he's not a sellout to the white media, that he's not a bootlick. And he thinks that he'll build a following with us doing that. But it ain't happening. And there's not enough intersectionalists out there to actually give him any sort of following. You see, the people who get all warm and fuzzy about Tarana Burke, or the people who get all warm and fuzzy about the garbage that Mark Lamont Schill likes to push, those clowns, there's not enough of them, and these people, they don't spend any money. You want to know how it is that TBA and Tariq were able to do what they've done? It's because when you talk to the black grassroots, when you talk to the black street, you're talking to black folks who actually are about getting theirs. You're talking about black folks who believe in putting money behind the message. They don't just believe in lip service. And there's a large number of them. See, that's what TBA and Tariq understood that the roly-polies and the Mark Lamont shills don't understand, because the truth of the matter is, while TBA and Tariq want to work for the black grassroots, Lamont Shill and roly-poly are desperately trying to do what they hope will be a resume enhancer. They're hoping that this is basically going to be some sort of enhancement for their LinkedIn page. That's the reason why they're doing these little sideshows, hoping that some white HR person or white producer will look at them and go, well, maybe we could give them a show if anything opens up. Giggle, giggle. But Lamont Shill, the only two people who he brought on his little show who actually got him any views for his Ain't Nothing YouTube channel, and he thought that it was a good idea to argue with them. He thought it was a good idea to call himself having a go at them. The best thing that ever happened to that little empty vanity project of his, and what he does is he spits in their faces and makes it very clear that he doesn't like them. He might as well be doing a group chat on his cell phone when you look at the rest of the videos that he posts. But of course, Lamont's intended audience isn't really black people. His intended audience are the white media paymasters who he hopes that he can get back into the good graces of. The white media to whom he wants to prove that he can control and corral the opinions of black people. Now, since Burke has a book coming out that she calls a memoir, Shill wanted to talk to her about it. There's two things that are absolutely stunning to me about Tarana Burke having a book. First of all, she's the first person in human history to have written more books than she's read. And secondly, a memoir is what a person writes in their old age. It's a summary of their entire lives. KRS-Two is in her mid-40s. She's barely middle-aged. And other than start a hashtag and be a flunky for the white media, what the hell has she done? But Shill talked to her about her book. Not surprisingly, they didn't talk about her buddy Rose McGowan. Oh yeah, those two are on stage together, arm in arm. Talk about a study in contrast. You've got this pale white supremacist with a face that's had so much Botox and plastic surgery that basically it's as smooth as a cue ball. And at least Rose McGowan watches her weight, and she's standing beside a black woman who needs a plastic surgeon and a dietitian and a personal trainer, with a face that looks like the surface of the moon. No, Mark Lamont Shill didn't ask her, hey, your old buddy, Rose McGowan, these days she's endorsing Larry Elders and saying that Black Lives Matters is a bad thing. How do you feel about that? He didn't ask her about her pal Rose McGowan and the remarks that Rose made about Black Lives Matters. Lamont Shill didn't ask about that. Though he did go into this bizarre little rant where he started complaining that whenever he posts something on Twitter, he gets bombed with people who start saying that Tarana Burke hates black men.
Whenever I tweet you or tweet about Me Too or tweet anything that's, anti-rape, which apparently is a radical position in some circles, people say that you are part of this movement to destroy men, or sometimes they say to destroy black men. They say that Tarana Burke is an enemy to black people and black men. When you hear stuff like that, I know there's a political answer and I want to hear that, but there has to also be a personal answer to that. How do you feel when you're framed that way?
The personal answer is this: it's the most heartbreaking thing that I've experienced in the last 4 years. And you know me, right? Like, know me. I consider you a brother. And hear people say me, I'm the blackest person people know. I've spent my life committed to black people.
Literally.
Right? And everything, I bleed red, black, and green. You think I would do anything that would jeopardize my community? But at the same time, if there are people in the community that are trying to harm others in the community, they should be accountable for that. So yes, I want to say, if there are black men in the community or black women in the community, anybody in the community that wants to harm other people, we have to call that out. Accountability to me is another form of love. And if we really love our people, then we have to be willing to hold them accountable when they harm us. I'm not going to die on the hill of just black just for the sake of being black, because every brother ain't a brother. And if you think that I'm not going to call out an R. Kelly, who is a serial predator in our community, because he's black, that's a problem. Because who will speak for the black women? Who will speak for the black children? I love black people. I love black people, full stop. I love black men, full stop. And because I love black men and because I love black people, I'm okay with holding us accountable. But it's painful for people to say I'm an enemy to black men. Absolutely not.
Every brother ain't a brother. Indeed, and every sister ain't a sister. Ain't that right, Joy Reid? First of all, when you look at Marc Lamont Schill's timeline, you see that the post that he made about Burke a week ago only got a few retweets and absolutely no comments. I'm posting these up here for you to see. Do you see any freaking comments on these posts whatsoever? And this is right before he brings her on the air. Not one comment, not even one. So Marc Lamont Schill is having hallucinations about imaginary haters. He wishes that people cared enough about him to post hate on his timeline. You see, what black people are doing to Schill is far worse than hate, because hate isn't the opposite of love. The opposite of love is indifference. Black people don't care enough about Schill to even hate him. They just ignore his very existence. So he's lying when he talks about these imaginary people who post critical remarks on his Twitter feed. What he's talking about is the black media, who in our own realms, where people actually pay attention, we don't let people forget who and what Tarana Burke is about, where she comes from, and why the white media put her on in the first place. Well, for all the 5 minutes they put her on. But you heard what her response was to that. Oh, I'm pro-black. Nobody's blacker than me. Gee, that reminds me of what the white media was saying about Lee Daniels. White producers say that he's too black. Well, that's what I hear, mostly from the white media. But Tarana Burke, oh, nobody's blacker than me. I just love black men. Yeah, she loves black men so much that she's made attacking black men her full-time job. Throughout this endorsement masquerading as an interview, Schill sings Burke's praises nonstop, and he then tells everyone to go get her book when it comes out.
And that's why you're so successful. That's why we love you. That's why I love you. And that's why I'm so proud of you. And I'm so proud of this book. Everybody, I want y'all to go out there and get this book. Matter of fact, and I don't usually do it, I want y'all to go out there and buy 2 of them. And if you know somebody that is in need of a book like this, go buy them one too.
Easy stomach. You gotta keep that Pepto-Bismol on standby when Marc Lamont Schill is in rare form like this. The kissing up to her makes absolutely no sense. But here he is telling people, go and buy 2 of her books. Go and buy her books. Go and buy her books. Okay, and how exactly did that go? According to USA Today's book rankings, after 2 weeks in release, Burke's fiction book is sitting at 60th place. 60th. That's where she stands right now in terms of copies sold. Now, Schill put out a tweet saying that she was number 3 on the New York Times bestsellers list. Let me tell you something about the New York Times bestsellers list. In order to be called a bestseller, all you have to do is sell 5,000 copies in a 7-day period. That's it. You don't have to sell 100,000 copies, or even 50,000, or even 10,000. You sell 5,000 copies in a single week, and you can call yourself a bestseller. And the New York Times, they have a lot of latitude with who gets placed where. Keep in mind, Gabrielle Union and even a basketball player, these people also have books that have just come out. And apparently, according to the New York Times, they're not doing as well as Tarana Burke. Now, keep in mind that in many cases, these books are bought up in large numbers. They get bought in lots by rich activists who want to get their pals put on the list as a bestseller, and in many cases, librarian groups, many of whom have their own biases, they're in a position to also do lot buys like that too. In other words, it ain't rocket science to engineer getting someone on the Times bestseller list or just on a bestseller list, period. And you probably notice that it's also listed as an Oprah book. My question is, why the hell ain't it number one with a bullet? On all the lists, it should be a freaking literary phenomenon. Why, you have the founder of Me Too, who happens to have Oprah Winfrey's decrepit seal of approval, and of course, Mark Lamont Schill's endorsement. Why, that's a license to print money, ain't it? But we've not only gotten a final verdict on the influence of Mark Lamont Schill's endorsement, we've also gotten confirmation that Oprah's book club label, well, it ain't what it used to be. See, Oprah, like Schill, was an invention of the white media. King's World Media, to be exact. They're the ones who made Oprah what she was. The white media made sure that there was a hands-off approach to her. They treated her more or less like the second coming, like she walked on water. But when the white media pulled their support for her, she's been struggling ever since. So the old dead black media flunkies are floundering. They're resorting to tricks and schemes to prop up the illusion that they still have something resembling influence. But as we can see, their reach is weak and getting weaker by the day. They are so unimportant, people don't even bother to go on their timeline even to throw insults at them. That's how you know you're irrelevant. I'm sure you've also noticed that Joke Reed is now slithering away from talking about Haiti. We've been making sure that people ain't been forgetting, so they've been forced to have to mention it, but they're trying to basically lower the curtain slowly on it. After all, Joe went ahead and cleared them all out, got them flown the hell out of here, so nothing to see here, right? This is typical of the black bootlicks. Their white paymasters tell them to do a single one-and-done story, and then that's it. It's over. No more talking about it. It's a done deal. We're moving on. On Reed's Twitter timeline yesterday, she had not one, not two, but 3 retweets about her colleague Tiffany Cross's fibroids. 3 retweets about a co-worker's fibroids. Damn, Joy, what are you trying to tell us? Go see a doctor already if you need to. The other of her retweets was a repost with a video of a kid in school who was saying that the injustice system favors those with money. Okay, I was like, well, that hard to argue with that because there's nothing to argue with. Okay. Kids going on saying if you have money, you can make cash bail. Okay. If you have money, you can afford lawyers, even if the lawyers think you're guilty. First of all, it's not a lawyer's job to determine guilt or innocence. It's their job to be an advocate. But, this is a kid in middle school or elementary school or whatever. Obviously, I don't expect him to think that far ahead. But if you are going to hold this kid up as being a fount of wisdom at a young age, at the very least, shouldn't he know the basics? But then I see why it is that Joy Reid really wanted to retweet this video. The kid immediately lapses into a bizarre rant about O.J. Simpson, saying, he literally paid his way out of jail. He paid people to let him free. This kid actually said that. Well, no wonder Reid like that. I mean, the kid just went on about O.J. Simpson. I'm sitting here going, gotta wonder whether or not this kid's got some immigrants in his background or something. But I wonder if anyone told Scooter Jr. or Joke Reed about O.J. Simpson's Las Vegas trial. Huh? O.J. Simpson was not some filthy rich guy, okay? Johnny Cochran was the reason he didn't go to prison. It's because Johnny Cochran's an excellent lawyer. That's the reason why. What he had was an attorney who was determined that his client was not going to go to prison for a crime he didn't commit. That's what made the difference. Having a competent and determined counsel, not money. Bill Cosby's got money and he wound up in prison. I noticed Scooter Jr. didn't say anything about that, so they're cherry picking. But obviously Joy Reid, just like Mark Lamont Schill and Roly Poly, this is how they put on shows for their white paymasters, making sure that the hopefully the white people whose opinions matter will see this and they'll think, oh, okay, we got ourselves a good little Negro. Okay, she's doing good. That's right. We're going to keep you around for another week before we cancel your contract. Your contract is safe for another 30 days. But this is what is coming from the black bootlicks for the white media. This is what they're concerning themselves with. Vaccine obsession, intersectionality, and taking shots at black people, particularly black men. This is what the bootlick media has been up to. They want the Haitian issue to die a quiet death because they are hoping to preserve themselves. Joy Reid's like, the last thing we want is to be bringing this up and having people saying, gee, why is it that the majority of black people are basically ignoring the plight of the Haitians and basically are not that concerned? In fact, why is it that we see them saying, hey, let the Haitians be all deported? That's their problem. They're not part of our community because they said that they're not going to bring that up because Joy Reid, that's her talking about herself. She's not going to be doing that. Instead, it's a matter of let's go ahead and just move on, because to talk about it anymore would be too dangerous. Hopefully, these bootlicks think, hopefully we'll go back to trying to forge a Pan-African partnership with people who are basically tethers. They were expecting black folks to come to the Haitians' rescue to rally for them, and we didn't. It's a brand new day. And now these black immigrants in the media are getting called out. They're being associated with this. The connections being made between what we saw on the border and with the people who are, or rather are not, talking about it. This increases the probability that they're going to be a total liability to their white paymasters, because they're going to be associated with what equates to a loss for them. I told you about how the white media is already trying to pivot to boosting DAS FBA bootlicks like Val Demings. CNN made sure to mention that her lineage goes back to slavery in this country. I showed you the stories from CNN about that. They might as well have been saying, yoo-hoo, all you B1 people out here, here's Val Demings. You can't say that she's an immigrant. So they're already preparing their fallback position. They're already getting that set up. They've seen how the black media has raised awareness about what this migration thing has meant for us, and they're now quietly, subtly changing the rhetoric. Very carefully, very quietly, they're trying to pivot. And they're hoping that it'll go under the radar and that they can trick a few of us into going along with it. We'll look and go, oh, well, this is exactly what we've been talking about. That's what they're hoping will happen. If they say, oh, why, she's one of you. We're supposed, like the Jedi mind trick, we're supposed to look and go, yeah, she's one of us. And the bootlick con game will continue. Swipe out those bootlicking migrants with some homegrown bootlicks. The roly-polies and Joy Reids and Issa Raes and all the other tethers who white power set up, they can see this, and they're afraid. That's the reason why they want to move on from this or try to mischaracterize it as something else. TBA in his video last night, he played a clip of roly-polies saying, and all you B1 people, y'all are only just now concerned about Haitians, etc. He said we were concerned about them as if we've been putting on the cape for them and we've just been biting our fingernails and, oh, look at how the Haitians are being treated. How sad, how wrong. We gotta do something. When nobody said that at all. Everyone can see that we've made it clear the Haitians and the other black migrants are on their own. We will support them the exact same way they've supported us, which is not at all. So why would Rowley say that we suddenly are concerned about what's happening to them? That's weasel words from a rat. He's trying to put a slant on it as if somehow he follows up by saying, this is the reason why y'all need to be concerned about all these other, I told y'all about these other migrant groups, and how dangerous this would be. Interesting how the people who were beating their chests and bragging about all of their immigrant background, now all of a sudden, they've gotten bashful about it. Roly-poly's suddenly talking about the African-American side of the family. Well, he ain't talking about it. He's just basically saying, well, I ain't just Haitian, you know. Oh yeah, now they're trying to find a way to quietly step away from it. They're trying to walk that one back. Because white power installed them as the ostensibly spokespeople for you and me, and they see that we have rejected their puppets. We've rejected these spokespeople, and we've made it clear on what grounds that we're doing so. And the message is unmistakable. The quote-unquote African Americans are distinguishing themselves from the black migrants like Roly-Poly and Joy Reid. But he doesn't dare say that because he doesn't want his would-be white paymasters to see him saying, the majority of black folks, they done basically voted online, and they voted me off the island, and I don't mean Haiti neither. That's what he's done. So instead, he does this mentally psychotic claptrap where he pretends that we're worried about the Haitians and that he's saying, see, I told you so, when that was not what happened at all. These bootlicks, they're trying to invent their own alternative realities. They're trying to take refuge inside their own dream worlds because we've exposed them. They're trying to convince themselves that they're still the ones with a media megaphone given to them by the white media, and that whatever they claim is reality, people are going to believe it because they said it. So Mark Lamont Schill is hallucinating that imaginary people are blasting him on his Twitter feed when nobody is commenting at all. Roly-Poly has had psychotic breaks with reality now, where the people who are saying deport the Haitians are actually concerned about them. This is what happens when helpless people become hopeless. Reality has crushed them, and so they're trying to escape reality. Well, let Mark Lamont Schill and Roly-Poly have their dream worlds. The black media will be busy taking charge of the real ones.